I got recalled to the service in January of '54. And the Army and the Air Force had just gotten divorced. And the Air Force, which previously had been called the Air Corps, decided, by God, we're going to do things right. We're not going to do it the way Army did. We're not going to have postmen driving tanks and cab drivers in the infantry. We're going to put a guy in a civilian occupation. So when they recalled me, I insisted I was a television director. I had a degree to prove it. I had a press book to prove it. I didn't say anything about engineering, or I wound up in Armed Forces Radio. And so they sent me to San Antonio, Texas. And for 6 weeks, I went around and took inventory in the bathrooms and the offices, counting the furniture all over the base. And finally, I was assigned to the 1354th Video Production Squadron at Lockheed Air Terminal in Burbank, California. That was the Air Force's first television unit. And our job was to show the Air Force how television could be used. And we bought our equipment out of the RCA catalog, had to wait 6 months for its delivery, bought 3 big post office buses, 45-foot buses, and we put our equipment in one, and the second was a carrier for the equipment, and the third was a personnel carrier. Videotape had not come along, so we had a GPL, General Precision Lab, 16-millimeter kinescope recorder. It was simply a 16-millimeter film camera set up in front of a television set, and you photographed off the monitor of the set. We put this together. While we were waiting for the equipment to come in, we had nothing to do. So I knew a person at ABC and called him, and he got permission for us to bring a group of people over and watch them do television shows there. Space Patrol, shows like this, and some very good theatrical performances that were over there. So again, this was another internship, sort of to see how things came on. But the Air Force television unit, once we got our equipment put together, toured the United States showing Air Force installations how to use television. We went to San Rafael, to Hamilton Air Force Base, and there was a radar station up on Mount Tamalpais. And we were able to show them that you could send that radar picture back down to Hamilton Air Force Base and take 300 people off the mountain. Because if you've got a group of people there, you've got to feed them, have a laundry, have housing, and so forth. We went to Cape Kennedy, and there was at Patrick Air Force Base, just south of the Cape, there was a big telescope called the Boston University Telescope. And when missiles were fired, they would track them, and there were 2 students. One cranked with a big crank. One moved the scope this way, and one moved it up and down. And we showed them how you could put a television camera on the scope and tie it to radar, and you didn't have to have those people tracking. We went to Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, and in one afternoon, I directed 6 training films on how you work in a control tower. Control towers are very small. You can't get very many people in it at a time for training. So we put a television camera on the ramp outside, the porch outside of the control tower, shooting in the window, and one on top to shoot the airplanes and one on the ground. And the examples would be, if you have a jet plane coming in running low on fuel, and you have one on the runway that's about to take off, and somebody declares Mayday, an emergency, who do you give the priority to? They were short, but they worked well. And then these kinescope recordings would be taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base at Dayton, Ohio, where there was a film lab and would be developed. And one of the things they said, while you're here, we have a device and we want to do a briefing for Congress. And how many people do you really have to do this? And I said, well, we have about 15 people in the crew. No, how many people do you have to have? What's the minimum? Because this is a classified device. I said, well, you need a cameraman, and I guess the cameraman could do the lighting. And you need one person in the truck who can open the microphone and roll the kinescope recorder, and probably a third person, a video operator. So that's the way we did it. And the day we went to shoot, and I said, well, could I see this device? You know, I'd like to see how much lighting you need and so forth. And they said, Lieutenant, when the Chinese communists capture you, they can't make you tell something that you don't know. Now, can they? So I said, no, I guess you're right. This device was called the Fat Boy Bomb. I saw it in the encyclopedia 20 years after that. And when we shot this thing, we pulled our trucks up there, a platoon of air policemen were around the place, and a full bird colonel from Dayton, Ohio, with a pistol on his hip, stood by the recorder, took the film, and got on a private plane and went back, or an Air Force plane, a small plane, and took the film back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And it was later shown to some congressmen. So that was Air Force.